This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good afternoon and welcome to Live and Learn on the Bigger Picture with me, Lim Su An. Recently, it was unfortunately reported that 468 suicide cases were reported across the country in just the first 5 months of 2021 alone, compared to 631 cases in the whole of 2020. Now, as people continue to grapple with prolonged social isolation, the financial uncertainties that come as we continue to battle COVID-19 in the country, what toll is this taking on people's mental health, and is this contributing to a rise in those suicide cases? So today I am joined by Justin Victor, Chairman of Befrienders KL, as well as Anita Abu Bakar, the President of the Mental Illness Awareness and Support Association, or MIASA as it's commonly referred to, and we want to discuss the possible impact of the pandemic on rising suicide cases, as well as the importance of the role of helplines during these times, in lending an ear to those who need it the most. Thank you so much to both of you for joining me today.
Thank you, Sue-Ann, for having us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sue-Ann, and thank you, BFM, for having us.
It's our pleasure. Now, Befrienders is a well-known emotional support helpline. I think a lot of people have seen your number being shared quite a lot, especially in the recent months. But I noticed that MIASA also has a crisis helpline that's set up as part of your services that you provide when it comes to providing emotional support. Now, what role do both of you see helplines playing when we are now in what many would call a mental health crisis? Justin, perhaps I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the helplines are seen as the famous word being used now, frontliners, is the first recourse for anyone who's going through distress, being distraught, etc. And I also see the role maybe akin to what one may know of, maybe the American style of paramedics. So we are first on the scene, and not on the scene of a suicide, about people who are distressed, reaching out to us, and then we do a basic help as far as we can. And if the person is going through a more major issue with some other past history, etc., which would indicate maybe a more serious mental health problem, we often enough refer them to seek professional mental health care. Yeah? So the role is essential because, again, as you had pointed out, the whole pandemic has created this whole feeling of being down or being oppressed in some way. However far near the actual pandemic and the cases are to you, everyone is affected. So anyone who is even slightly already troubled before will be more troubled. So the helplines definitely are this, not a quick fix, but an immediate help to allow people to just get it off their chest and begin to share and talk about what's troubling them. And, from years of experience, we're not talking about just few years, 50, Befrienders itself in Malaysia, 50, around the world, close to 70 years. It is a proven thing just to speak or allow people to speak out their problems can already decrease their intensity of emotions. And when that happens, then they can make better decisions for themselves, etc. And to relate it quickly to suicide also can be averted to a large extent. Allow Anita to say that. Yeah.
Anita, MIASA is a patient-centered organization, right? So from your perspective, what role do you see helplines playing?
I really would like to echo what Justin just shared. Helplines, to me personally, and what we've seen and witnessed, it has been very, very helpful because it's within reach. It's affordable, accessible, it's familiar. People feel, safe because you can come in anonymous. People can't see you, and so you feel safe. You feel free, more free to share and express how you're going through. And I think what is important probably to highlight here is the first experience of that person reaching out, and how the other person on the end react or respond is crucial, Sue-Ann. So this is what needs to happen. The volunteer or the person manning the line needs to be trained, needs to come from place of empathy and compassion. So when a caller, or a person in crisis reaches out, they must feel heard, validated. And I think this is so important during that first experience. So of course, very, very helpful. And being MIASA, many of our volunteers, crisis team members are peers themselves. So they are people with lived experience. And I think this makes it easier because we're able to relate. We've gone through it. It's very, very quickly, the person will be able to express themselves. So this is what we've seen and witnessed so far manning these lines.
Do the people manning the lines have to be trained professionals?
No, definitely not. Because for us, our requirement is basically if you want to help, if you can commit, if you are passionate for the cause, we have basic requirements such as you've got to go through some PFA, and then you have to go through continuous training with us. So it could range from listening skills to communication skills to trauma-informed care and crisis management training. Obviously, being MIASA, not only do our crisis team members man the helplines, but they are mobilized as well in the sense they go to the person that is in crisis for whatever reason it could possibly be. Bring them out for a drink or bring them to the hospital, for example, bring them to a safe place. So this is one of the advantages, I would say, that we have at MIASA. So we're able to mobilize ourselves at the same time listening to the person that is in crisis.
Justin, what has it been like for Befrienders KL in terms of the frequency of the calls that you've been getting as well as the nature of the calls? Because I remember in the early months of the pandemic, Befrienders said that the number of calls did increase, right? But now it's been 16 months since March last year. We are in our fourth national lockdown with a lot of with significant areas under the EMCO as well, right? What has it been like at Befrienders?
Well, definitely there's been an increase. It is so obvious that we are overloaded and overstretched in many ways, So we're actually happy to see.
Right? All of us.
That's why we're happy to see actually many other lines coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So we have seen a growing number, even before the pandemic, and, really to a big jump. And just to give some idea of it, like whole of last year, we already had 40,500 calls in the year. The previous year was only just about 38 or so. And then this year, half year gone, we're already seeing about 21,000. So if you see that, that's already higher than last year in the average. The reason, though, I wouldn't directly put it necessarily to the pandemic, because along with the pandemic, maybe, and the issues coming up is awareness of mental health issues, awareness of sources of help like ours, So then maybe the idea of let's reach out is getting wider and stronger among the public. So a lot of people are taking it up. And we do track in a way, at least roughly, how many of those who call have or say something that indicates that they are affected by the COVID and the pandemic. So we have for that only about 35, maybe 40% of the callers with problems who would say that somehow it is related to COVID. Sometimes it's not directly, not in the sense that they themselves have got to the thing, but maybe all the related things like loss of job, being stuck at home, and those kind of issues.
And what about from MIASA? You carry out a lot of support services, right? What has it been like for all the people that you've met and you've talked to?
Like what Justin just said, when we are now stretched so thin, we have beefed up actually the crisis team members. We are currently recruiting more. We're hoping, although we have about 958 volunteers across the nation, we just tallied this number a couple of days ago. And so our crisis team, we're trying to increase it to about 150 people right now to cater for the influx of calls, not only calls, WhatsApp, people reaching out on social media. And what we've seen, Suen, that the younger people, Justin, I think this is so prevalent, but the younger people now reaching out more, and many of them battle suicidal thoughts and also ideation. So between the ages of 12 to 16, we have seen an increase in that. We have also tallied our numbers in terms of the calls, WhatsApp, people reaching out via social media. So I can share with you the numbers really quickly. We recorded it we've always recorded our numbers, but since August. So what we did is after RMCO, we tracked it really closely. So from August last year till July 2nd, actually, we've received a total of 9,012 calls, WhatsApp messages, 18,093. Face-to-face and virtual sessions. That means people that reach out and come for peer support or therapy sessions, mental health assessments. In total, 12,300, and people that reached out to us via social media platforms, 8,514. Via emails, 707. I think we know this. Emails, not very many people reach out via email. I think because of the response time as well, because it takes time to actually go through the emails. And so total, Suen, we're looking at about 48,626. And for us, that's a huge jump because for that same duration, usually we are looking at about 20,000. So that's a big number that we're seeing, Suen. So hence why we're trying our best to cater for this influx. And, we tell people all the time, if you're reaching out, if nobody picks up, please try again. And you can try many other ways because, we're available not just via, the numbers, but also Google Meet, WhatsApp, email, social media, and we're available on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So there's different ways to really reach out to MIASA, and we try to make it accessible in many ways just to break that barrier to access. So that is what we're looking at right now. So and not just befrienders in MIASA, but all the NGOs on the ground are stretched very thin at the moment. I think it's a good thing in a way that the conversation has been so open that more people are reaching out for the help. And we're very happy that a lot of Malaysians are taking this proactive approach. Many are being so responsible on social media, sharing all the helpline numbers, because that really is, the minimal thing that everyone can do right now is to provide all these resources so that, anyone that is in need, they go to the social media and they know I can call this number for help, right?
What usually prompts someone to call in, right? Because for some people, it can still be daunting to, just pick up the phone and call someone and you don't know who is on the other end.
Right. I think from what we've seen from all the reports from our crisis team members and volunteers, the reasons really vary. But I think generally people need a place to talk to. They need a safe space. They want to be heard. They want to be validated. Sometimes, especially being in this lockdown, they're probably in a very difficult situation or space. Maybe family members are their triggers, for example. So I think having just someone that is neutral to talk to can be very, very powerful at the same time. So I think having that emotional help, I have a lot of friends, two kinds of friends, obviously, but my group of friends that are, normal in that sense, that do not struggle with any mental health conditions, tell me all the time now in this pandemic, they said, Anita, now we can really relate, at least get a glimpse of how, people with mental health disorders feel like, because even for them, sometimes they feel okay emotionally. Sometimes they feel, oh my God, what's happening? They don't feel okay. But now that, I share with them so much that they understand it and they're able to tell themselves, look, it will pass, and everyone's resilient in that sense. But of course, people that are going through mental health disorders are impacted more. And probably those that before the pandemics when are going through probably some mental health issues, it has exacerbated because of the whole pandemic and of course the measures of the pandemic and what has happened, loss of jobs or loss of loved ones, and of course the whole uncertainty. It seems endless, right? COVID, despite the lockdowns, COVID-19 numbers are still rocketing. People are still dying. We feel that the vaccination process is kind of slow at the moment. So there's so much, stress that are available. And so just calling that helpline really helps. So this is what we've seen. And from the feedbacks, this is also what people have been telling us. So every time that they're going through a panic attack, for example, more people are going through panic attacks. This is also what we've witnessed. More people are feeling anxious and overwhelmed. And so when this happens, they just reach out for the phone and, they call us in.
It's in a way, talking to you is like a call out to the people who are in need of this service. You don't need a clear idea of what to say when you want to call. Even
Right.
if you just have the sense that I don't know who to talk to about this, I don't know what's happening with me, but I am disturbed, already pick up the phone and call one of the
Yep.
helplines. We have a lot of people who call and then the first thing they say is, I don't know what to say.
Exactly.
You know? So don't worry about that. Don't have
Yep.
to have a fixed, clear idea of all my
Yeah.
problems thought out already, and then I'm
Yep.
going to share it. So all the people out there are listening to this and who you want to encourage to call the helpline, just call. As long as you're feeling that sense of being alone, don't know how to deal with it, troubled, you can't talk to people, just call. And we'll take care of the rest in terms of helping you to how to get it out, to talk by lead questions. And we don't probe, of course, but we will ask some things that will help you to clarify what's happening with you, listen to you, support you. Anyway,
Go through, help you to go through that thought process. Justin, that's so interesting because when people call in, sometimes they just cry. They don't say anything.
Yeah.
We just cry and we just, be with them. Yep.
That's really reassuring to hear because sometimes, some people might feel hesitant, right? Whether this is the right time to call, should I be calling helplines when, especially when you hear reports that helplines are already busy, right? Some people might feel like maybe certain issues are not worth speaking out about. And the important message here is that if you feel that need to just talk to someone, for someone to just listen, that's when you should call a helpline.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
All right, we'll go for a quick break now. Joining me on Zoom today are Justin Victor, the chairman of Befrienders KL, and Anita Abu Bakar, the president of MIASA, and we're discussing how their organizations have been responding to people who need mental health support during these trying times, and also the concerns over the rising cases of suicide, which we'll get to after this short break. Keep it here on Live and Learn on the Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9. Welcome back to Live and Learn on the Bigger Picture with me, Lim Suan. On the show with me today are Justin Victor, the chairman of Befrienders KL, and Anita Abu Bakar, the president of MIASA, and we've been discussing the role of helplines in providing emotional support to people who simply need someone to speak to or who may be having suicidal ideation. And, before the break, Justin and Anita were sharing how, it's important to just reach out to speak to someone if you feel like you need to. There are no expectations when you call in, and, they're just there to listen to anything that you would like to share. Now, let's also look at the worrying reports of suicide cases in the country. Based on police reports, 438 cases were reported just from January to May this year, compared to 639 in all of 2020. Now, in just 5 months, we're already seeing almost 69% of last year's cases. How concerned are both of you about this rise in suicide cases, and do you think the pandemic has been a contributing factor, whether directly or indirectly? Let's start with you, Justin.
Yeah, okay. Definitely anytime, even if there is one suicide, it is disturbing. I often don't want to get caught up in the figures because this is my thing. Even if there's one, it's one too many. Yeah. But what we are seeing is even in that scenario, we are seeing a rise, and police are giving these official figures. And so that means it is an absolute certainty that these people had died by suicide. But for a long while already, we've had numbers which are now only beginning to show, according to what the researchers have said. Yeah, so definitely it is, in a way, the rising awareness coming through this reporting of the figures is essential, because then people will focus more on saying how specifically we can address and take care of people who are feeling like wanting to end their lives. Yeah, so definitely extremely worrying. But the alarm bells hopefully will also create quicker and wider action on prevention.
I think, Suan, what we've seen is it's very much in line with what has happened throughout human history, throughout the pandemics in the past, or epidemics, or war, famine. Great Depression, for example. We rarely talk about that. The psychological impact and suicide risks have definitely increased. Obviously, people fall into depression, have anxiety, PTSD. People resort to harmful coping mechanisms like drugs, for example, which exacerbates the situation and our mental health struggles, for example. So this is very much in line. This is not something new. But the irony of the whole thing is we're not prepared. So I think that now with everything that has happened, we need action. We need to empower the community. I think this is so important. I talk about this a lot, really. So I apologize to those of you that are listening about task shifting. So task shifting really needs to happen, because if we empower the community, then everyone can become a resource. So these things can be prevented, when people have the knowledge, when we seek knowledge, when we're not quick to judge, when media, for example, are more responsible in the sense that they do safe reporting, or what is being portrayed, in films, movies, in music videos, in live shows and programs, for example, portraying people with mental health disorders accurately, with whatever that they're going through, the depth of their struggles, ending it successfully, because, the wider public, we all hold this perception where people with mental health disorders are, crazy, violent. But what is so important right here is we perceive that people with mental health disorders can't recover. This is the whole problem right here. And so we think it's a lost cause. And I think that now with all this awareness going on, like what Justin was saying, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. People are now more aware. A lot of companies, corporations, a lot of different stakeholders are all coming together, asking MIASA and all the different NGOs, how can they help? What can they do? And this pandemic has really exposed all these gaps, has really exposed how polarized our society is. And so I think, fortunately or unfortunately, all this had to happen for this whole conversation to come about. And I'm very, very happy really with the whole awareness. Very happy how Malaysians have all come together to help. But I think what needs to happen is a more sustainable model for those that are struggling, and more comprehensive mental health services.
Is that then where you see the limits of helplines, right? Do you think we rely too much on helplines? I mean, yes, they are important first line of response, right, in these situations, but do you think there's an over-reliance on helplines without enough emphasis or investment into actual mental health support?
Well, I don't think it's a limit per se, but I think that when we have helplines, then we can at least have a gauge on data, because data is very important. So, and if we don't have data to show or support this, then more services or resources are not going to be made available. So if we are able to have this data, if people are calling to the helplines, we're able to gauge how many of these people are actually going through chronic or need severe intervention. Then all the rest will follow suit, and this is what we're really seeing at the moment.
I think there's absolutely no thinking that there are too many helplines.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need all the help. We need all the help.
And I think that the thinking has to move from it's not just either helplines or other efforts. It has to be a multi-pronged approach. It has to be something from government, which is happening. There has to be something from civil society and NGOs, and that's happening. And so the helplines definitely have a place, and even more so now because of the accessibility. Then people can't move, can't go out, can't go to centers, etc. So the helplines are absolute necessity, and there are many, and they can't be too many. A quick shout out on our website, the Befrienders KL. We have a listing of all the other centers. Anita's MIASA is also there, with the numbers. You have Talian Kasei and several others, which actually the list was given by Ministry of Health, KKM, Kementerian Kesihatan Malaysia. So that's a source for people. If Befrienders KL is blocked up, if Anita's line is blocked, there are other options for immediate help, and so people can reach out and look for that. So yeah, absolutely no such thing as too many helplines, least of all right now.
Something both of you have mentioned a few times is how we talk about mental health, especially the reporting of mental health, right? Justin, how much of a difference does it make in terms of how we report about suicide cases, especially in the news? Why is it important that we mind the language that we use and how media organizations report about such cases? Because, I think it was a few weeks ago, there was a lot of concern over how certain media outlets had used pictures that were insensitive as well as descriptions that could influence suicidal ideation.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. This is an extremely important area because when we're talking about a heightened situation of distress and distraught people all around, such images can be triggering. Such, not only images, but even the way news is reported with certain details, those can be triggering. Triggering, just for general understanding, is a way that when something happens or said, it can make you more upset. Mm-hmm. And if you are already upset, then you are going to be more upset. And taking it further, someone who's already having suicide ideation may be triggered to actually follow or copy. So this idea of copycat suicides and suicide contagion is closely related to media portrayals. I'm also a media and communications researcher and lecturer. So we do that, and I actually did an extensive study with a group of people a few years back about media coverage. And often enough, what we have is people talking about how exactly somebody died, the means, the actual description of what they used and how and where they were. Those are all really unacceptable. There are many guidelines, this already out there from WHO, from International Suicide Prevention Organization. And then now here, what we are having is this viraling of videos of people who are in the act of ending their life. And that's extremely terrible to do. But just to make it clear, the mainstream media seem to be catching on nicely about how to report a little more responsibly. Mm-hmm. But it's the other maybe bloggers and other people, social media, that are still doing this sensational kind of thinking. And the other, of course, the mainstream media is doing very well. Along with that, they give crisis numbers to call. So that means someone who's triggered immediately has that kind of thing. But it's no small matter about how media portrayals can trigger someone. The suicide contagion is a well-known and scary effect.
And that's where social media can be quite scary, isn't it? Because of how fast things are shared. And it's there where the responsibility then falls on us as social media users to not reshare these posts and to educate others on, what is responsible social media use.
Yep. And if I may add as well, I think what the other thing that probably needs to happen is if you, as a producer of a film or movie, in your board of advisors, you've got to have various stakeholders on board. So it could be a mental health professional, a person with lived experience, be it a peer, a caregiver, and what is important is the bereaved, because if you talk to the bereaved, the person that has lost a loved one via suicide, for example, right? You will understand the impact of all these unsafe reporting towards them because they themselves are at risk. They're the other group are at the highest risk of also being impacted in terms of getting a mental health disorder or having or battling suicidal thoughts and ideation. So I think it's so important that we have these people on board if you are interested in creating awareness on this very sensitive topic. And I think that in the age of social media, where everything is so accessible, especially information and research, that we all need to be more responsible and understand how that can impact. How beneficial is it to share those kind of videos and pictures. This is the thing that we all can understand. It's just about sensationalizing things. This really they must be held accountable, I feel. Maybe we can impose, I don't know, fines, something that can deter people from doing this, because, for the longest time, Justin, all of us, we've shared, media guidelines, we share it all the time. But again, all these things had to happen. And then now, the awareness is out there. So we all now have a bigger role to play. And again, like what Justin was saying, suicide contagion is so unfortunate when it happens, because it can very much be prevented. And I think we also don't realize how those that are vulnerable can be triggered so badly. And we have peers telling us how they attempted was through reading the media on methods, because methods are being disclosed. And so they said, whenever we think about ending our lives, we just flip through the media pages, and that's how we chose the method, for example. So this is what has people have been telling us, which is very, very sad and unfortunate.
This is a huge topic that requires another conversation on its own, but let's also briefly address the decriminalization of suicide. It's a topic that has been quite widely discussed over the past few years. There was traction towards amending the penal code to decriminalize suicide, although that hasn't been put in place yet. Why is decriminalizing suicide important towards providing better support for people who have suicidal tendencies?
Yeah, on the most basic level, we are talking about calling an act a crime when it is actually not, when it actually should be approached from a very humanitarian approach of care and concern, rather than a punitive arresting, remanding, and all those. So not only is the law in itself and some of the practices a problem with decriminalization, just the existence of such a law and the existence of the thought adds on to the negative view of people who are thinking and who are attempting to end their lives. And that adds on some more to the whole stigma about this thing that people go through, having suicide ideation and even attempting to take their own lives.
Yeah, I think what we need to realize is decriminalization of suicidal attempts is a strategy to really help people that are in need, people that are battling suicidal thoughts and ideation. Because let me tell you, suicidal thoughts and ideation is very intrusive. You can battle suicidal ideation for months and years, and your thought process at one point can be closed because you have so much of underlying issues that's not being resolved or not been helped. And I think what is more important of a question could probably be for us to highlight, is criminalizing suicidal attempts. There's a lot of harm to it. First and foremost, people will choose methods that are fatal, because if you don't die, then you can be in prison, for example. And then when you go to prison, there's no help. And a person that is going through this and they're ill, we're not well, we're not a criminal, we need help. And even if unfortunately, you die via this act, it is because you want the pain to end. And let me tell you, being a person with lived experience, psychological pain is very painful. It's excruciating pain. And what more if you don't get treatment? What if you internalize stigma? You struggle alone in silence. And I think this is so important for everyone to understand, that we need help when they're contemplating. And they wished and they hoped that someone came up to them and asked, how are you? Can we help? So this is what we really, really need to realize. So can you imagine you're not well, whatever condition you have? Just imagine that you're going through, let's say, food poisoning, and somebody tells you, labels you, you're lazy, you're not trying hard enough. Snap out of it. Can you imagine? That's a double whammy right there. And it's already so painful, and people are not hearing you. You're not being validated. So it pushes you to that brink where you feel, there's no way out. Nobody cares, I'm not worth it. And this is when, unfortunately, that unimaginable act will happen. And I feel so saddened when we still have this law, because it reinforces stigma. It creates all these labels, and then when that act happens, family members then become victims, because then you get labeled, you get stigmatized, and then you are prone and at risk of getting a mental health disorder. You really need to break this chain. I always say it's the chain of stigma, the chain of suicide, and it can only happen via knowledge. It can only happen through empathy and compassion. We don't understand mental health disorder. It's fine, but do not be quick to judge. Be there, listen, but don't listen to judge. Don't listen to advice. Listen to understand. Listen for emotions, right? Especially Suan and Justin, being in this pandemic of COVID-19, everyone is struggling with something somehow. So I think the time of for unity and solidarity is now. I think we have to stop saying so much, stop judging. I think even with the issue of the white flag, people are saying so much. To me, simple. You don't want to help, don't say anything. Others want to help, let them help. And I think Malaysians all have to come together. We're all going through. We're not going to be able to get through this if we don't come, together, collectively or in unity right now.
So on that note, then, at the individual level, what are the perhaps warning signs that we can look out for if someone we know is going through some emotional distress, and what can we do to help?
At the most simplest level is to look out for changes in behavior in terms of eating, sleeping, loss of weight or gain of weight, withdrawing, all of those. So the simple rule of thumb is changes in behavior. And then further, when we go to thinking about whether someone's having any intention or even ideation of suicide, is to look out for things that they may be saying, or even hints that they're dropping. Oh, it won't matter anymore. Everything will be fine soon because I won't be here. But basically, we're saying there are things that we can do to, first of all, identify, because you're saying about the general person on the street and with their friends and family and neighbors. So identify the signs. And then the other level is, of course, to ask them how they are doing. And in asking how they are doing, often enough, people generally answer. I keep using this in all my talks. I'm fine, yeah. But don't stop there. That's why the conversation doesn't stop there. Don't bug the person until they are so fed up, of course. But
until they need to say, I'm not fine, right?
Yeah, you just go on to the next level and say, but you look troubled, or you look like something's disturbing you. Do you want to talk about it? I'm willing to listen. So that's the first level of opening up, and what everybody can and should be doing. Often enough, people ask, how are you? They say, I'm fine, and it stops there. So someone who is struggling alone quietly continues to struggle alone until their own situation gets worse and worse and worse. Anita.
Yeah, I think there's so much fear, to be honest. People don't know how to react. People don't know how to respond. And I think a lot of fear that I've heard, especially from, caregivers, for example, and friends saying that, Puan Anita, if I ask them that, will I trigger them further? But guys, look, please know and understand that they are waiting for you to ask. They are. So please just ask that question. And if even if the person is not ready to open up, helping isn't easy, right? Mm-hmm. So please be patient. So don't be afraid. You're not going to trigger them further. But like what Justin was saying, choose your words carefully. I think this is also important, because sometimes we do hear stories from our peers where, it took them probably a week, trying to contemplating whether they should share it with a friend or family member, and then eventually when they do, their worst fear happens, they get judged. So I think that please, guys, those of you that are helping your loved ones, choose your words carefully, be sensitive, and have empathy.
And, if they want to speak to someone anonymously, we have so many options, right? NGOs like yourself, like Befrienders like MIASA are there if they want to speak to someone else. But both of you mentioned how both your organizations have been overwhelmed quite a lot for the past few months. What sort of support or help would you need at the moment for you to keep providing those services to people?
For us, the basic thing is get people to reach out and talk. For the service itself, we are doing okay. Financially, we need the public's donations, of course, to keep running. That's always been there. And if you go to our website, on the opening page is already begging for money to come in. But besides that, I think on a wider level is asking people to use our service. If you want, we don't get any money or more calls or whatever, but to use our service when you really need it, and also wider scale to call, not just us befrienders, but others too. And maybe one other thing I'd like to highlight here, 65% of our calls are from females, whereas there are a high number of males in proportion to women, higher, who are actually ending their lives and having mental health problems. So a call out then is men call in also, talk to somebody. It's not a sign of weakness. Actually, it's a sign of strength to be able to admit and take care of yourself for your family. Yeah.
And what about for MIASA?
I think, funding and support, that's always a big thing. Again, being NGO on the ground, what we've come to realize, really, Suen and Justin, is that not everyone understands the modus operandi of NGOs. They think we have lots of money or regular streams of income. We actually don't. And like what Justin was saying, doesn't mean that we don't earn from people calling us, right? So having that sustainable model, I think, is so important. So when support comes in via, money or funding, it's really helpful because it enables us to provide more training, consistent training to our volunteers. We're able to probably give a bit more of token. You know how people overseas, how they do it, and is they have a structure, what is called supported employment. Supported volunteering. So when you have volunteers, of course, volunteers want to help, but if you give them a token, so it's called supported volunteering, where you give them a token, then they feel more acknowledged, they feel more appreciated. They're able to commit further because then they can probably earn a little bit of income from there as well, even though it's not much, So yeah, definitely more funding and support would really, make NGOs more sustainable in that sense, and having dedicated lines. Maxis, Celcom, those service providers, if you guys are listening, we do need those lines to come in for NGOs, so that, like Justin was saying, we need more helplines, to be honest, to cater for this influx.
We actually do need more volunteers, but right now we can't train the volunteers because of the lockdown. But if you're interested to become a volunteer, we definitely need more people. Just write into us. We'll keep you on hold. As soon as we open up and have training, we will invite you in. So check out our email on our website and then just write to us your interest. Thank you.
And before we end, could I get a quick message from both of you, perhaps Justin first?
Yes, reach out, talk to somebody. We are here. Don't have to think that you need to handle everything all by yourself and alone. Some of us can't give you the practical help, but hopefully we can help you to be in a better state so that you can deal with your practical needs yourself.
Anita?
For me, those of you that are listening, you're not alone. If you're going through any kind of mental health or mental health disorders, the message of hope is you can recover. There is a way out and there is always hope, and we're in this together, all ready to help. So please reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you both so much for coming on the show today. I've been speaking to Justin Victor, the chairman of Befrienders KL, and Anita Abu Bakar, the president of the Mental Illness Awareness and Support Association, or MIASA. If you would like to speak to someone anonymously for emotional support, you can call Befrienders at 03-7627-2929, or you can also find out more about the other hotlines that are available on Befrienders and MIASA's websites. I'm Lim Suen, and you've been listening to Live and Learn on The Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.